Hey folks, this is Kalani, with the Shadowlands expansion announced and everyone scrambling to soak up all of the information they can about what's coming next for World of Warcraft. One question is a tad louder than the others. What's happening to the classes? Class changes are usually one of the major highlights of an expansion, or at least they have been in the past. BFA didn't really change too much, which was actually quite problematic for a lot of classes, because Legion's class design was centered around artifacts. After they were stripped out, quite a few classes were left feeling dull, boring, or just downright wonky. That hasn't really been helped by the Azerite armor or by the Heart of Azeroth essences, and the global cooldown change tacked on top of that made for a less than stellar class experience. But a new expansion brings new hope. So let's see what the Shadowlands has in store regarding class changes. The big slice of news that has everyone excited is the return of many class abilities that were taken away over the last few expansions. The great unpruning is upon us, I hear players call, and that definitely sounds like what the dev team has in store for us. We have quite a few examples of spells and abilities that are being brought back into the game with Shadowlands. Hopefully there's something in here that gets you excited. Some of these are class-defining mechanics, the kind of spells or effects that, when you see them, you immediately think, oh, awesome, we have a paladin in the group, or a shaman, or whatever it happens to be. So we'll be seeing the return of Paladin auras, Devotion, Retribution, Crusader, and Concentration aura. I guess they'll all go back to being a passive aura that you can toggle on and off. Got 2 Paladins in the group? Cool, 1 run Devo, 1 run Ret. Job's a good'un. That's the kind of class flavor that we just don't see too much in BFA right now. Shaman totems are another big one, and not just the totems that you throw down for stuns or fear breaks, but the totems which are persistent and stick around for longer than 5 seconds. Healing Stream Totem and Searing Totem are 2 great examples, and they'll be back for every spec of Shaman. Even more totems might be changed back to how they used to work, being persistent effects instead of mini cooldowns. Rogue poisons are a great example of how specs have been given more attention than the class as a whole. Right now in BFA, you can't use poisons unless you're an assassination rogue. That seems a bit silly, really, considering poisons were one of the pillars of rogue fantasy for so long. In Shadowlands, all rogue specs will be able to use their poisons once again. Instant poison, deadly poison, crippling poison, numbing poison, all available to every rogue spec. Warlocks are another candidate for this kind of spell renewal with their curses. Right now, I think there are maybe 1 or 2 curses that a warlock can use, and only if you're the right spec. Well, Curse of Doom, Curse of Tongues, Curse of Recklessness, and Curse of Weakness are all making a return. They might not be the most powerful spells in the world, but at least you'll have the choice to ignore, use them once again. It wasn't just abilities being removed that made classes feel a bit wonky to play though. With so much of your class being locked behind choosing a spec, the chance of seeing an ability that's usable in more than one spec was actually pretty rare. That just seems so weird. If you're a priest, you should be able to use a couple of heals and a couple of shadow damage abilities no matter what, right? Well, that kind of restriction is also being lifted in Shadowlands. Mages will be able to use Frostbolt, Fire Blast, and Arcane Explosion all at the same time. No more frost only, fire only, or arcane only spells just for the sake of it. You're a mage, you should be able to throw out a few different elements even if you aren't super proficient in all of them. Hopefully it's more than just these 3 abilities, but those are the examples we were given. Priests should be able to do the same thing in the next expansion, and I would assume this goes for plenty of other classes that have a lot of crossover between their class fantasy and how each spec operates. If you're a hybrid class, that means you should see a lot of abilities return to your spellbook that allow you to tap into your healing or tanking potential or whatever else it might be. This goes beyond just spells and abilities though. A lot of weapon choices have been locked in for the past few expansions. Dual-wielding Enhancement Shaman or dual-wielding Frost Death Knights come to mind immediately. Not being able to equip a shield in a certain spec is also another one, so some of those restrictions are being loosened. We don't have any super specific details, but hopefully they'll get rid of all restrictions entirely. Being able to choose what weapons we want to use is part of the fun of an RPG, and from everything we've heard so far, it definitely sounds like the dev team wants to put the RPG back into our MMO RPG. Here are some other iconic class abilities that will be made available to all of their specs instead of being locked behind just one. All Death Knights will get raised dead back on their bars, all of the Shamans out there will be able to slow their foes with Frost Shock once again, Consecration will become baseline for all Paladin specs, Ursol's Vortex will be given back to all of the Druids, Shiv will make a comeback for the Rogues, and every Death Knight spec will be making use of Death Coil once again. But there are other areas of the game that we have sort of lost abilities to. We didn't really lose them because they're still there, but taking a core ability of your class and shoving it into the talent system so you have to choose whether or not you can use that special class ability is kind of lame. They didn't do that just once though, they did it again for the PvP talents. Thankfully that's something else that they're backtracking on. The examples that we have are Demonic Circle for the Warlocks, Summon Gargoyle for the Death Knights, Hunter's Mark for the Hunters, Hammer of Wrath for the Paladins, Cyclone for the Druids, and Anti-Magic Zone for Death Knights as well. All of these talents or honor talents will be brought out of that system and given back to the classes to use as baseline abilities. A round of applause for the dev team please, they might actually understand this time. An interesting knock-on effect from these talents being made baseline abilities again is that the rows of talents we've had for the last expansion or two will now have some pretty significant gaps in them. That means the more talents that come out of the current system and are given back to us, the more new talents we have to look forward to. I assume the list that we've been given isn't an exhaustive list of their current choices, just the ones that they're absolutely sure about and could maybe get us a little excited. Plenty of other classes could see talents turn back into abilities in the next expansion that aren't included in this slide. The unpruning doesn't stop there though. Some key abilities that have been sorely missed are also coming back to us. Examples include Shattering Throw for warriors, because someone has to break those paladin bubbles, right? As well as Kill Shot for hunters, Ritual of Doom for warlocks. Alright, don't get too excited out there, we know you want to kill your friends, but is a Ritual of Doom really the best answer? Yeah, okay, you're probably right, it is. Challenging Shout will make a return, and so will Eyes of the Beast. I think I just heard the masses of hunters cheer out in synchronous applause. You'll be able to mind control your pet and run around to your heart's content. If that's not a reason to pick up Shadowlands, I'm not sure what is. So a lot of abilities are being added back to our spellbooks, some abilities that were made talents or honor talents are becoming baseline again, and overall we'll just have more buttons to push. People are calling this an unpruning for a reason, and I have to say I am looking forward to feeling like I'm playing a class first and foremost, and a spec is added onto that. The devs did mention that they've taken a lot of inspiration and learned a lot of lessons from the release of Classic, specifically how classes and specs behaved back in the day, and I don't think that's a bad thing. It looks like Classic might be influencing retail's development after all. If you're maybe worried that we still won't have enough abilities to make your classes feel full again, bear in mind that one of the dev team's goals for the Shadowlands expansion is to make every level feel meaningful. Part of that is getting a new ability every level that you don't get something else, so you'll gain access to mounts, dungeons, features, talents, all that good stuff, but on every other level that you're not getting some of that, you're going to get a new ability or spell. That's a lot of levels, even with the level squish. If you don't know too much about the level squish, you can find a video in the comment section below that goes into a lot more detail. My point here is that to make every level meaningful, we have to have a lot of abilities that we're able to learn. I think our spellbooks are going to go from slightly anemic in BFA to full-blown fatsos when this expansion launches. So there's going to be a much stronger focus on class identity and class fantasy as opposed to spec identity and spec fantasy. Lots of abilities coming back, that's great to hear. But what about some actual new class changes? Some classes and their kit works really well right now. Others, not so much, but from what little we've heard about class changes, it sounds like the dev team doesn't really want to stir anything up too much. Adding back in all of these abilities is their current plan for changes, which isn't necessarily going to fix any of the classes that are really struggling right now. We don't have any information whatsoever on any sweeping changes for classes. In fact, when they were laying out all of their master plans for classes and the unpruning, the topic of class changes did come up, but the response was simply, we don't want to change too much. We won't see class changes on the same level as Legion this time around, which is another expansion without significant changes by the sounds of things. That didn't work out all too well going into BFA, so it kind of surprises me that they didn't have more to talk about. I assume we will be seeing some class changes, because we've been told time and time again that class changes for Battle for Azeroth just aren't on the table right now. 8.2.5, no class changes. 8.3, no class changes. The soonest we will see any significant changes is 9.0. Sorry, which would be the next expansion, or at least the pre-patch for the next expansion. Shamans in particular haven't been feeling all too loved, so hopefully something will be waiting for you later on down the line, but we're going to have to wait until we can actually get our hands on the game to find out if any changes are planned. That's going to be quite a while. I haven't heard anyone talk about any changes to classes on the demo that was available at BlizzCon either, so if they are planning on shaking things up a bit, it isn't something they had ready for this brief demo period. But leveling up in the Shadowlands expansion is going to provide you with some extra talents and abilities though, right? Well, maybe not. The talent system isn't really changing at all, but it is getting squished down along with our levels, but the last talent row is unlocked at level 50. Right now the talents are spaced out, so you get the first row at level 15, then level 25, then level 30, level 35, level 40, 45, and the last one is at level 50. So we'll actually have access to all of our talents right off the bat, which is kind of cool, but that also means we won't have a new talent waiting for us at max level. This was another factor about leveling in BFA that felt a bit weird. We didn't really have much to look forward to at max level at 120. Thankfully, there do seem to be various other systems in place to make your grind to level 60 in Shadowlands worthwhile, but a new talent won't be one of them. Hopefully the gaps that are filled in the talent rows will bring some new and exciting options to the table though. New class abilities is something that's going to work a little different in Shadowlands as well. From the looks of things, all of our new powers will come from the Covenant and Soulbind systems. Covenants are kind of like a reputation faction, but except they're way more important. While you partner up with one of these covenants, you'll gain access to one movement ability and one class ability. These change depending on which covenant you're currently aligned with. I'll give you a link in the comments below to a video that details everything about covenants as well. If you're interested in Shadowlands, I would definitely check it out. The covenant system is definitely the most important feature in the new expansion by far. But simply put, you will gain 2 new abilities as you level to max, but they won't be tied to your character, they'll be tied to your covenant. That means a warrior who joins the Night Fae is going to play a little differently when compared to a warrior that joins the Kyrian. That's kinda cool, but I do worry that we're walking into another temporary power situation. It's nice for the time being, but it doesn't really fill in any gap in any permanent way. There is another progression system tied to the Covenants called Soulbinds. We might not be getting a new talent at level 60, but we will be unlocking a new talent tree. It's a little small right now, but remember that none of this is in a finished state. Getting to know your Soulbind buddy will unlock more and more powers in this tree, and you can bind your soul to several individuals, giving you access to a few different talent trees. This will hopefully give us a lot more options when it comes to customizing your playstyle at max level, and give us a reason to be excited about getting to some of the endgame in Shadowlands. Even with all of this being added to the game and the clock being turned back on talents and pruning and all that jazz, I do worry that some classes will still feel too patched together to really be fun. They don't have to reinvent the wheel every expansion, but some class changes are definitely needed right now. 9.0 in the Shadowlands release is probably the last time we'll get to see any large changes in the next few years. The dev team has been so hesitant to make any real class changes for the entirety of BFA. We were promised some big changes several times, and it was always just a band-aid. Now we've been told to wait for 9.0, but there doesn't seem to be anything in the pipeline. They might just not have shown us their ideas at BlizzCon, or they might still need to get all of the class changes that they do want to implement fully fleshed out before giving us a glimpse of them. Either way, I hope we have some class changes coming with the Shadowlands expansion, we just haven't seen anything yet. I love the idea of getting back to classes instead of specs. That should help every class feel like they're at least a complete theme. Just having poisons or just having shadowy stabs is pretty flimsy when compared to having it all at once, and then doubling down on one aspect of your class's gameplay by choosing a spec. Mages should be able to use all 3 schools of magic at the same time. Shamans should be able to tap into their melee, their spells, and their healing potential at the same time. I'm really excited to get back to that, but besides Blizzard having a good chat with Chromie and turning the clocks back on some of their bad design decisions, I wonder what else this expansion will have in store when it comes to class changes. Right now it looks like we might be playing the same game as Battle for Azeroth, but instead of Azerite traits we have the Soulbind talents, and instead of the Heart of Azeroth essences, we have Covenant abilities in their place. That might be enough for some players, but I know a lot of people who are disappointed with how their class currently plays, and that key main factor that affects all types of gameplay looks like it won't be changing all too much going to the next expansion. Again, the only time it was brought up was to say we won't see any grand redesign like we had in Legion, so take from that what you will. But that's all we have for class changes going into the Shadowlands expansion. Do you think the new features like Covenant abilities and Soulbinds will be enough to change up how your class plays? Are there any talents or removed abilities that you would love to see added back into the game as baseline spells? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave. If you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.